Another night has passed, and with it, the IDF has intercepted another ballistic missile that was fired from the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen. Thankfully, this one was also intercepted outside Israeli airspace, but Israel now faces a tough choice about whether to strike back in Yemen or at the head of the octopus in Iran. Meanwhile, despite launching so many attacks against Israel, the Houthis are still not designated as a terrorist organization by the United States State Department or the EU. Israel is trying to change that. A meeting of the United Nations Security Council to discuss this issue is scheduled for next week. Later in the broadcast, we will also hear from TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani about the growing panic in the Iranian regime as domestic unrest intensifies, the economy continues to deteriorate, and rumors circulate about a possible Israeli attack. But before we launch an attack on Iran, Israel has sent another powerful message to the entire Middle East by closing a multi-billion-dollar deal to purchase some of the most advanced defense equipment from the United States of America. Closer to home, the IDF has also dealt a heavy blow to Hezbollah as we approach the halfway point of the 60-day ceasefire agreement. What's left of the Hezbollah organization and its leadership is scrambling to find a path forward amidst the ruins, and Israeli intelligence say that they've already picked some fresh targets for their terrorist operations. Meanwhile, on the border with Syria, reports say that the IDF has set up a civilian administration system and carried out arrests of Hezbollah terrorist spies deep inside Syria. And in Judea and Samaria, the IDF is in the midst of a large-scale operation in Tulkarem that began at midnight on Monday. In the Gaza Strip, the IDF carried out a raid to arrest terrorists who were hiding in a hospital in Jabalia. Some of the terrorists did not want to be arrested, so they preferred to be eliminated while fighting the IDF forces instead. Additionally, the IDF struck a Hamas launch site near a United Nations building in the northern Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, in the matter of the negotiations for the release of our hostages in Gaza, Israel's negotiating team is returning from Qatar, and we are all struggling to understand where Hamas is heading. A senior Israeli official announced that Hamas has backtracked on the softening that led to the renewal of talks. Reports indicate that Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of the late Hamas leader Yair Sinwar, is preventing progress in the deal. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 446 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and all the Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq. All of them are taking their orders from the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, Iran. Before we start, I would like to wish all of you a happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to TBN Israel so that you'll never miss another update of Boots on the Ground. Today's video is sponsored by MEMRI. This important research institute helps us and many others to better understand our world by translating media reports from different languages into English. I'll explain more about them later on, but first, the news. Overnight, between Tuesday and Wednesday, alarms were heard in many areas of central Israel for the second consecutive night, following a ballistic missile that was launched from Yemen. The IDF announced that a successful interception was carried out before the missile entered the Israeli airspace, and that the alarms were due to fear of interception debris. In addition, Magen David Adom medics and paramedics were called to several scenes where reports were received about approximately 9 people who were injured on their way to bomb shelters, and 2 of them suffering from anxiety. Following the launch, the spokesman of the Houthis wrote in Hebrew on his X account, "Run to the shelters. We warn you many times to stop killing the children of Gaza. I cannot let this come and pass without pointing out that there are hundreds of thousands of children starving to death in Yemen, and the Houthi group, which controls that country, is doing absolutely nothing to help them because they're so busy attacking Israel." And speaking of Israel, Defense Minister Israel Katz visited an Arrow battery on Tuesday morning and addressed the issue of launches from Yemen, telling the assembly troops and the media that I warned and said that just as we dealt with Sinwar in Gaza, Hania in Tehran, and Nasrallah in Beirut, we will also deal with the heads of the Houthis in Sana'a and everywhere in Yemen. We will act both against their infrastructure and against them in order to remove the threat and eliminate the threats to the state of Israel in order to achieve our goals. Anyone who sponsors Houthi terror in Hudaydah or in Sana'a will pay the full price. And meanwhile, the United States and its partners continue to bomb Houthi infrastructure in Yemen, but it does not seem that these actions deter the Houthis or disrupt their plans. Similarly, the fact that Israel has struck the Houthis in Yemen at least 3 times and the Defense Minister Israel Katz has sworn to reach Commander Abd el-Malik el-Houthi does not deter them. He, along with the Houthi spokesman Yahya Sari, in their strange and high-flown appearances, continue to threaten the United States, Britain, and especially Israel in the clearest words. So apparently, Israel is left with just one stubborn, undefeated terrorist organization for now. The Houthis in Yemen, who express solidarity with Hamas and continue to wail about Nasrallah, are not willing to back off just yet. They would still rather start trouble with countries thousands of kilometers away than find solutions to the terrible problems faced by ordinary Yemeni people. Speaking of ordinary Yemeni people, it is important to understand that this country, with very few natural resources and catastrophic environmental problems, is home to a population of almost 35 million people. The Houthi armed forces, which are embedded in the general population, number between 150 and 250,000. Most of them are not highly trained or equipped. Although the Houthis are able to fire these ballistic missiles at Israel and fire anti-ship missiles and UAVs against merchant ships in the Bab el-Mandab Strait, almost all their military capacity comes from Iran. The Houthis specialize in remote action using Iranian-made missiles and advanced UAVs. Yemen's geographical location and size is also complicating factors in Israel's ability to manage this threat. So far, the Houthis' attacks on Israel seem to be planned to come more frequently. Since the beginning of December alone, the Houthis have launched missiles or UAVs at least 8 times. Israel was quick to respond by striking precise targets in the capital city of Sana'a, and the United States also attacked Houthi infrastructure in Yemen. But these strikes have not had the desired effect, as the Houthis have sworn specifically to continue attacking until the fighting in Gaza stops. As I said before, Yemen is a country with a population close to 35 million people, and there is hardly any economy there to speak of. Famine and disease claim thousands of lives in the country every single day, and the Houthi administration does little to address these problems. Aid from the United Nations and international humanitarian organizations arrives infrequently in the country's ports, which the Houthis control. Like in Gaza, most of the aid that arrives gets stolen by the Houthis themselves or by the criminal gangs who flourish in these port cities. Little of the aid makes its way to those who need it the most. However, Iran sends a steady stream of weapons, ammunition, and supplies to the Houthis so they can continue threatening Israel and international shipping. Until a full ceasefire in Gaza is achieved, the Iranians will continue to equip the Houthi leadership not only with weapons and military equipment, but mainly with instructions not to stop and to keep attacking Israel. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to provide updates on the matter, and we ask you to continue help us by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. You can also help us by subscribing to this YouTube channel if you haven't already, so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. In between the videos, you can visit our website at tbnisrael.com for updates throughout the day. We now switch our focus to the northern arena, where the IDF is rapidly setting up a new civil administration in the areas of southern Syria that it has been deployed in order to secure the approaches to the Israeli border and the Golan Heights. According to reports in Arab media portals, several control centers were established to receive Syrian dignitaries and muhtars, aiming to open channels of communications with the residents of Syria. Meanwhile, there are reports that IDF forces carried out arrests in the Quneitra area of suspects accused of spying for Hezbollah, but the IDF has not confirmed these reports. According to the Lebanese El Akbar media portal, the IDF has informed the residents of the villages in the area that they may return to their normal routines of working their agricultural lands and tending to their flocks and herds of livestock. This step followed protests against the Israeli presence that had occurred in some villages, but new intelligence assessments have concluded that the security situation is stable and normal work routine can continue. A report in the El Arabi El Jadid news portal said that IDF forces have carried out arrests of suspected terrorist operatives and criminals in several villages in that region, confiscating weapons and other equipment suspected of being connected to efforts by Hezbollah to spy on the Israeli forces. The IDF has concerns that due to the ceasefire in Lebanon, Hezbollah will try out to attack the IDF forces in Syria under the cover of rebels or Syrian civilians who have no ties to Hezbollah. Israel states that any Hezbollah activity in any area will be met with a harsh IDF response. We know that after its crushing and humiliating defeat in the recent war against Israel, Hezbollah is looking for a new path forward. They are trying to rebuild their forces, looking for new recruits to replace the thousands of fighters that were lost and eliminated and wounded, and above all, they are looking for new leadership to replace those that were terminated. Hezbollah sources told the pro-Saudi newspaper Ashrak El-Awsat this week that the organization's top priorities for the next stage revolve around three main issues: conducting a comprehensive assessment of the previous phase, continuing the investigation into the matter of the beeper explosions, and the funeral of the organization's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, and the head of Hezbollah's executive council, Hashem Safi El-Din. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on all these matters. We talk a lot in our shows about what is happening in the Arab world as well as in Iran and Turkey, and how it's affecting Israel and the rest of the world. We always try to stay on top of these issues so we can give our viewers, you, the best and updated news. In order to understand what our allies, enemies, friends, and everyone in between is thinking about, we have to be able to see things through their eyes. MEMRI is a research institute doing exactly that. The researchers and analysts constantly monitor media portals in the Arab world as well as Europe, Russia, China, and elsewhere, bridging the language gap and alerting us in the West. They also monitor extremist mosques and Islamic organizations all over the world, including inside Western countries, through social media. It is crucial that legislators and governments, as well as the general public, will stay current with this information. We want you to have access to this information as well, but in order for them to keep uncovering the truth, they need your help. So please visit their website at www.supportmemri.org. They are a non-profit organization, and all donations to them are tax deductible. Your donation is very important so they can continue with this mission, and you, our viewers, can consider yourself part of the battle for a better world. Thank you, and let's get back to the news. We switch our focus now to a rapidly intensifying crisis, one that connects Iran's multi-front war against Israel, the Houthis in Yemen, and the shifting dynamics in the Middle East. In just the past 72 hours, the Iranian-backed Houthis have escalated their mission and drone attacks targeting Israeli cities and maritime routes. These are not random acts of aggression. They are part of a calculated Iranian strategy to stretch Israel's defenses while destabilizing international trade routes. And meanwhile, Turkey is asserting its own growing influence in this region, complicating an already volatile situation. As these developments unfold, Israel faces critical decisions on how to respond to threats from Yemen while countering Iran's broader regional ambitions. To unpack these critical developments and their far-reaching implications, I'm handing it over to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst, Mati Shoshani, for an in-depth analysis. Mati, over to you.
Thank you, Yair. The situation we're witnessing with the Houthis in Yemen is far more than a localized conflict. It is part of a larger Iranian strategy to project power and destabilize the region through its proxy forces. So let's break this all down. Over 100 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones have been launched by the Houthis since October the 7th, with a sharp increase in the past 3 days. These attacks have targeted Israeli cities, critical infrastructure, and maritime routes in the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandab Straits. One missile even hit a school in central Israel community of Ramat Efal, narrowly avoiding a playground. This shows the indiscriminate nature of these attacks and their potential for catastrophic civilian casualties. Beyond Israel, the Houthis have disrupted over 100 European-operated vessels, creating a ripple effect in global trade and oil supply chains. Iran's involvement is undeniable. The Houthis are equipped with advanced missile technology, training, and operational support directly from Tehran. This isn't just about destabilizing Israel. It's about asserting control over key strategic waterways and challenging the West's influence in this region. In response, the Israeli Air Force has conducted 3 rounds of strikes targeting Houthi launch sites and command centers, all in Yemen. These strikes have been precise, but have not yet deterred the Houthis from escalating their attacks. The IDF has also enhanced its missile defense systems, particularly the Arrow 3 interceptors, which have been critical in neutralizing the Houthi threat. However, the cost of this operation is immense. Each interceptor costs $4 million, highlighting the financial strain of sustained defense efforts. But there is another development that is not getting nearly enough attention. While Iran uses proxies to destabilize the region, Turkey is capitalizing on the chaos to expand its own influence. Turkish-backed forces have solidified control over northern Syria and are now eyeing greater leverage in Yemen. President Erdogan is positioning Turkey as a dominant player in this region, balancing its relationships with NATO, Russia, and Iran. Turkey's growing presence in Yemen complicates the equation, as it could either act as a counterbalance to Iran or exploit the situation for its own strategic gains, as it's done before. The collapse of the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria, which we discussed in previous report, has created a power vacuum that Iran is desperate to fill. However, with Syria no longer a reliable corridor for smuggling weapons to Hezbollah, Iran has turned to Yemen as a new front against Israel. This shift has significant implications for Hezbollah specifically and for regional stability more generally speaking. The loss of supply routes through Syria has weakened the group's operational capacity. Israel's continued airstrikes in Lebanon have further isolated Hezbollah, forcing Iran to rely more heavily on the Houthis. And meanwhile, Arab states like Saudi Arabia and Egypt are watching closely. Saudi Arabia in particular has ramped up its own offensive against the Houthis, indicating a potential alignment with Israel against Iranian aggression. The key question is whether Israel will continue its focused strikes in Yemen or escalate its operations to directly target Iran. Defense Minister Israel Katz has hinted at the possibility of targeting Houthi leadership in Sana'a, but Mossad chief Dedi Barnea argues for a more direct approach, striking Tehran itself to send a broader message of deterrence to the Iranian Muslim government. At the same time, Iran is recalibrating its regional strategy. Reports suggest that Tehran is exploring ways to destabilize Jordan or consolidate its hold over Iraq and Yemen as an alternative fronts against Israel. Once again, Israel finds itself at a pivotal moment. With Western powers, including the United States, taking a more cautious approach, Israel is the only regional actor actively countering Iran's influence. This is not just a military challenge, It's a test of Israel's diplomatic and strategic resolve. The days ahead will determine whether Israel can neutralize the Houthi threat while maintaining stability in its northern and southern borders. What is clear, however, of course, is that this is a critical juncture, not just for Israel, but for the entire Middle East. Now back to you, Yair Pinto.
Thank you, Mati, for that detailed analysis. As we've heard, the Houthis' aggression and Iran's broader strategy pose a significant challenge not just to Israel, but to the stability of the entire region. At TBN Israel, we're committed to keeping you informed with real-time updates and expert analysis. So if you haven't already, make sure to click the subscribe button below so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, let's shift our focus once again to the Gaza front. IDF forces and the Shin Bet, the Israeli security agency, eliminated 5 terrorists and arrested dozens more in and around the Indonesian hospital in Jabalia, northern Gaza Strip, in a targeted counter-terrorism operation that began overnight on Tuesday. According to the IDF and the Shin Bet, one of the terrorists arrested participated in the October 7 massacre. The mission was carried out by soldiers of the Givati Brigade under the command of the 162nd Division, following advance intelligence from the Amman Military Intelligence Agency and the Shin Bet about the presence of terrorists and terror infrastructure in the hospital area. According to the IDF and the Shin Bet, over the past month, terror operations were carried out from the hospital premises, including anti-tank fire at military forces. They also noted that the soldiers operating around the hospital encountered numerous explosive devices and booby traps planted by terrorists. To minimize the harm to the civilian population, the IDF forces allowed the residents, patients, and staff in the hospital to be evacuated in an orderly fashion before and during the operation. The military emphasizes that the operation was conducted only after multiple warnings were given to the Gaza Health Ministry, run by Hamas, about terror activities carried out in and around the hospital, and with the utmost caution to avoid harming non-involved individuals and to allow the hospital's activities to continue as much as possible. Meanwhile, Israeli Air Force fighter jets attacked a Hamas launch site located near a United Nations building in the Shati refugee camp area in northern Gaza. The strike was carried out after an announcement calling on civilians to evacuate the target area for their own safety. According to the IDF, after the attack, a rocket was observed being launched from the launch compound. And meanwhile, the Washington Post news portal reported this week that from satellite imagery provided to them, it is evident that Israel is carrying out extensive demolition activities alongside the construction of military fortifications in areas of northern Gaza, from which tens of thousands of Palestinians have been evacuated. The operation in the north of the Gaza Strip, in Jabalia, Bet Lahia, and Bet Hanun, began on October 5th, and the IDF says it will continue as long as necessary. The building of the buffer corridor was revealed on Ynet, an Israeli news outlet, and last week we reported here that the buffer zone will remain and the IDF will not allow Gazans to return to Jabalia. Experts quoted in these reports said that the new corridor that was carried out can separate the far northern area from Gaza City, enabling Israel to create a buffer zone that pushes the strip even further away from the communities on the Israeli border. This is just one of the ways that the IDF is working to restore security to Gaza border communities and the entire country of Israel. Other work includes a continuation of the mission to find, clear, and demolish the extensive network of tunnels that Hamas dug underneath the Gaza Strip, capture the vast quantities of weapons and ammunition that Hamas stockpiled in order to carry out attacks against Israel, and demolish the terror infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on the military developments in the Gaza Strip, but of course, the other big story is about the ongoing negotiations for a release of the remaining hostages. Before we get into that, I want to ask you once again to share these videos on YouTube, follow us on social media, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. These are the ways that you can be part of the team that helps spread the truth far and wide. After 2 weeks of optimism in Israel that the hostage deal was close, in recent days, that feeling has faded significantly. A senior Israeli official bluntly told the media this week that no one knows if there will be a deal or not. Hamas has effectively withdrawn from the softening position that led to the renewal of talks, and is again demanding that Israel commit to ending the war when the overall deal is done, as a condition for implementing its first stage. But no responsible Israeli party agrees to that demand. The Israeli official also emphasized that at any moment a breakthrough can happen, but right now there is no deal. We must stop the spin. There are also points of contention beyond the end of the war issue. Yet, even if Hamas suddenly becomes more flexible, there are serious questions about its capability to deliver to Israel the minimum number of hostages we require. After all, the organization has suffered an enormous blow, and its living space, the Gaza Strip, is in an advanced state of ruin. It's not clear whether or how much Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of former Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, wants and is able to return the hostages to their loved ones. He has been described by Israeli intelligence sources as more extreme and less sophisticated than his late brother. But there are only a few more weeks for him to reach an agreement with Israel before Donald Trump takes office in the White House. The incoming president threatened on multiple occasions that the terrorists in Gaza would go through hell if the hostages were not freed. Yet, he did not specify what exactly he intends to do. However, for several weeks now, various parties in Israel have claimed progress in negotiations with Hamas over a hostage deal, and that there is optimism and that Hamas understands the Iranian axis has collapsed and they are left alone. There are indications that the external leadership of Hamas wants to move forward with the deal, but for reasons that are not entirely clear, Sinwar is preventing this. Meanwhile, the impression in Israel is that Trump simply does not care what Israel does in the Gaza Strip. He wants only two things: the hostages freed and an Israeli victory that ends the war. How those goals are reached are not his concerns. Beyond that, preparations for Trump's second-term era are being kept very quiet in Jerusalem and at IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv. If the hostages are not being returned by January 20th, a whole new set of circumstances might follow. A senior Israeli official I spoke with recently expects Netanyahu to seize the opportunity that will open up to operate completely outside the box and not continue with the same format in which Hamas holds all of us as hostages, either to preserve its own existence via the hostages he keeps in the Gaza Strip, or to supply it fresh lifeblood in the form of hundreds of released prisoners from Israel. To explain further, Israel will be able to tighten its control over aid sent to Gaza. Instead of transferring huge amounts of fuel, water, and dual-use materials, only small packages could be sent in, putting additional pressure on the living conditions for Hamas's leadership. Additionally, the arrival of previously delayed munitions shipments will allow the IDF to expand its military operations, including resuming raids and increasing strikes on critical targets. Large-scale operations such as limiting electricity and water supplies or demolishing terror-supporting infrastructure could become feasible options that would challenge Hamas's continued rule in the Gaza Strip. Furthermore, Israel might renew psychological pressure operations in the Gaza Strip, including offering monetary rewards for information about the hostages' locations. Messages to Gaza's residents would be delivered in more innovative and effective ways, aiming to undermine the organization's internal morale. One of the most drastic possibilities that may open up is the evacuation of Palestinian populations from strategic areas in Gaza. A move like that, which in the past faced international opposition, could be used by Israel not only as a military response, but also as a political instrument for achieving its aims. If Hamas does not respond to these pressures, Israel may impose unprecedented measures involving significant military and economic actions aiming to alter realities in Gaza and achieve its security objectives. For now, the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Tuesday evening that the negotiating team, which includes senior officials from the Mossad, the Shin Bet, and the IDF, will return to Israel this evening from Qatar after a meaningful week of negotiations. The team is returning for internal consultations in Israel regarding the further negotiation steps to bring back our hostages. Israel blames Hamas in Gaza, and especially Mohammed Sinwar, for the difficulties and for not handing over lists of hostages in order to extract more concessions. In any case, we know that we must pray strongly for our hostages in Gaza, who are in the clutches of the brutal Hamas terrorists. Please keep sharing the truth and pray for the safety of the hostages. And God wants us to pray personally, to know who we're praying for. So I want to help you by giving you a face and a name and a little bit of a background story of one of the hostages. Emily Teila Damari, a 28-year-old British-Israeli dual citizen, was abducted from her apartment in Kibbutz Kfar Aza during the Hamas attacks on October 7, 2023. She is the only known British national currently held hostage in the Gaza Strip by Hamas. Affectionately known as everyone's friend, she is recognized for her grace and warmth. Her friends and neighbors describe her as the light and life of her community. Her home in Kibbutz Kfar Aza was a hub of social gatherings where she hosted the best barbecues on the entire kibbutz. In the early hours of October 7, Emily sent a final message around 10 a.m. indicating that terrorists were in her neighborhood and shooting near her apartment. Since then, there has been no direct communication from her. Emily's mother, Mandy, has been actively campaigning for her daughter's release, meeting with United Kingdom's officials and urging the government to take a decisive action. She has expressed deep concern over the lack of progress and fears for Emily's well-being, especially in light of reports about the conditions that hostages are enduring in the Gaza Strip. I cannot conclude this report without wishing all of you Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah. This festival, the Festival of Lights, starts on the evening of December 25th this year. I hope all our viewers enjoy this special time with their loved ones. Please continue praying for Israel, for the IDF soldiers wherever they are, in the air, at the sea, and in the land. Pray for the peace of Israel, and most importantly, don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and together we will win this war because God is on our side.